Well, yes, I had a question regarding communion. Somewhere in Corinthians it tells us, if we take the unleavened bread, if we take it in an unworthy manner, we're going to perish.
Right.
Is that true or false?
That is true. That's 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 27 through 29. It says, if anyone eats this bread or drinks the cup of the Lord unworthily, he shall be guilty of the body and blood of the Lord. Therefore, let a man examine himself. Because he then goes on in verse 29 to say that if you eat or partake of the body and blood of the Lord unworthily, you bring judgment, krino in Greek, you bring judgment or condemnation, damnation, if you will, upon yourself. The reason being, Martin, that if you have grave sin on your soul and you receive communion, communion is both a symbol of our communion with Christ and His church and the sacrament that strengthens that union. But see, if you're not actually in union with Christ and His church, then what you're doing is a sacrilege. You're saying with your body, I am in communion with Christ and His church, when in fact you're not. That's a sacrilege. It would be analogous, Martin, to me as a married man. I am sacramentally joined with my wife. And so if I were to conjugally go with another woman, well, that's a sacrilege because I am in communion, if you will, with my wife. So to go outside, that's a sacrilege. Similarly here, if you're saying with your mouth, I'm in communion with Christ and His church, but in fact you're not, that's why it's a sin. See, if you're in mortal sin, we have another sacrament that Jesus gave to us. Well, if you haven't been baptized, it's baptism that takes away all sins. But once you enter into Christ, and if you commit a post-baptismal mortal sin, then we have another sacrament called confession that Jesus gave us in John chapter 20, verses 21 through 23, where, after the resurrection, He appears to the apostles and says, peace be unto you. As the Father has sent me, so do I send you. And then He breathed on them and said, receive the Holy Spirit. Whosoever sins you forgive are forgiven. Whosoever sins you retain are retained. So there, Jesus gave another sacrament to be that instrument to restore that communion that we had through baptism that was lost through mortal sin, so that we could be in communion with Christ and His church again, and then we can receive communion. That's what Paul's talking about there in 1 Corinthians 11, 27 through 29. But you had a follow-up?